Alright, hello there, thrill seekers. That, of course, was Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys. My nephew wanted me to learn good vibrations for a TikTok video that he put up on his TikTok page. And I couldn't let a good thing go to waste, so I decided to do it myself. And I could have played along with the Beach Boys backing track, but I decided to do it myself. And whereas Brian Wilson spent 6 months recording in the best studios in the world with the best musicians in the world, I made my backing track in an afternoon all by myself upstairs with the same GarageBand system that I use for all my stuff. So it kind of sounds like the Beach Boys when they're loaded up on as many drugs as Bucky is here on this t-shirt. But there you go. Kind of sounds different. Maybe original, huh? Anyway, that's how that goes. So, today I wanted to talk to you about something that maybe kind of a corollary to what I talked about in my previous video when I talked about that little thing where we did the well-being ceremony for my aunt. And a lot of people understood what I was getting at, or I think they understood what I was getting at, but some people were saying, oh, you swallowed the Kool-Aid, and you're talking about psychic powers and all this stuff. And it reminded me of some conversations I had with Nishijima Roshi. Now, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't disclose this stuff, and maybe Nishijima Roshi will be rolling around in his urn. I think he was cremated. I was going to say rolling around in his grave, but I think he was cremated, so he's probably in an urn somewhere. Anyway, he'd be rolling around in his urn if he heard me saying this, because occasionally I would have private conversations with him about stuff that he didn't talk about in public, along the lines of some of the more esoteric, odder things that go on the fringes of Zen practice. Now, one of the things about Zen is that it doesn't really get into anything that might be called supernatural or paranormal or mystical. And mystical is the word I want to use as my kind of into this. Into this? Does that make sense? I don't know. So whenever we'd kind of talk about something like that in public, whenever Nishijima Roshi would talk about something like that in public, he would be very much against it. He would kind of put up a big brick wall and say, no, there's no such thing as that. Forget about that. We don't talk about that. Move on. Next subject. Go away. Anytime we talk about life after death or psychic abilities or anything like that, it would just be brick wall time. Dogen, too, is like that. He has an essay called Jinzu, which means mystical powers. That would be one translation of it. I think in one of my books, I don't know if it's Don't Be a Jerk or what's the other one called? It Came from Beyond Zen. I called it Buddhist Superpowers. Maybe that's it. Maybe somebody out there can tell me what I titled it. I have a bad memory for my own books or anybody else's books. But something like that, Buddhist superpowers, ideas like that are really downplayed in the Zen tradition. We don't like to get into stuff like that. And admittedly, when I did that video last week where I talked about the stuff with my aunt, I got into some stuff like that, and that's not the way we deal with it in the Zen form of Buddhism. In other forms of Buddhism, you do find a lot of that stuff. In Tibetan Buddhism, as I have been reliably informed by people who've studied it, I haven't studied Tibetan Buddhism too much, you find some of that. I've heard reports from people who've been in countries where Theravada is the dominant form of Buddhism, who say there's a lot of sort of magic and I was gonna say voodoo, but voodoo is actually a legit religion from the West Indies, but that kind of stuff, that kind of strange mystical stuff kind of surrounds it, but in Zen not much of that, and it's something that that's not talked about much. Now, the thing I want to talk about here, though, in this video, is a conversation I had with Nishijima Roshi about that. Now, I don't remember the conversation in great detail, but I remember one line of the conversation. I was talking to Nishijima Roshi about mystical experiences or mystical happenings, and he was, as he often did, putting up a big brick wall. And this was a private conversation. This was not in front of a group. This was just me and him in a room. And I decided to push a little bit and say, well, what I mean by mystical. Now, I wish I could remember exactly what I said, so I'm going to kind of make it up and tell you what I think I said. I think I said something like, no, what I mean about mystical is I don't mean anything like supernatural. I don't believe in the supernatural as in things that transcend natural, that go outside of the laws of nature, that sometimes the laws of nature can be broken and things can kind of intercede. So there's the laws of nature are happening, and then, some kind of special force comes along like God or who knows what, and breaks the laws of nature. I don't believe that that is something that happens. I do think, though, that science and rationality and the human understanding of how things work, these are good tools that can be put to good use, but are kind of limited. They don't have all the answers, and that there's a lot of stuff that can and does occur that can't be explained scientifically, that may have a scientific explanation somewhere on down the road. Maybe 100 or 1,000 years from now, science will catch up and be able to explain these things. But right now, contemporary science, as it stands, doesn't have a way of explaining these things. And there's plenty of stuff like this that we already kind of know about scientifically. One example that springs to mind is dark matter and dark energy. So scientists are aware that there is something that they provisionally call dark matter and dark energy, and we don't know what it is, but when we calculate, I don't really understand the whole thing, so I'm going out on a limb here. But when calculations are done for the stuff that happens on the universe, they have to put in here be dark energy. There's something going on that we don't understand, so we call it dark matter and dark energy. We know that there are forces out there in the universe that we can't account for. Okay. So I'm not saying that dark energy and dark matter are the same as supernatural forces and ghosties and ghoulies and stuff like that. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that nature has all sorts of things we don't understand, and that people, when they are doing a meditation practice, are sometimes thrown into this area that we might call the mystical, which is areas that we don't quite understand, we don't quite have a name for, but they open us up into a realm that is maybe wider than our usual experience, and that is nonetheless real. It's a real experience, but we just don't know what to call it, and provisionally we can use a word like mystical to just refer to it because we have to say something about it. I think I said something like that to Nishijima Roshi to explain to him what I meant by mystical. Probably close enough to that. And he thought about it, and he said, okay, sometimes it's mystical, but it is never strange. And I really, really liked that answer. It's a kind of a vague answer, and it's a kind of an answer that's hard to understand unless you knew Nishijima Roshi. So let me see if I can try to explain to you how I understand sometimes it's mystical, but it's never strange. To me, strange means something like, well, when I was into the depths of studying UFOs, I came across this phrase that often appears in UFO lore, high strangeness. This is, as I understand it, their phrase, the UFO nuts phrase, for things that are really, really weird. So they call it high strangeness. So yeah, in this world that we live in, sometimes we encounter things that have high strangeness, things that are really, really weird. So that's true. And I don't think Nishijima Roshi was trying to say that there's no such thing as high strangeness, but when he was saying it's never strange, what he meant is that anything that we encounter that we might call mystical, that is worth pursuing, doesn't have this kind of... How shall I put it? This is very difficult. It doesn't have this kind of feeling of spookiness to it, of otherworldliness to it. So, there are many things that I've encountered in my practice that were weird, that were beyond my capacity to put into rational terms that are easy to sort of parse out in kind of nice, neat, scientific language. And some of those have been strange, and the ones that have been strange I tend to discount as being not really worth pursuing. So if they've been strange in the sense that they've been scary or weird or spooky or kind of like give me the chills or the willies, I kind of go, I don't think I want to go there. I'm not going to pursue that. I'm not going to become like a psychic medium who gets into the weirdly strange stuff and gets everybody excited about that, and I don't go there. But then there's another category of things that are unusual and not run-of-the-mill and not everyday experiences, and yet they have a feeling of, oh, that. You see how hard this is to talk about. They seem at once not ordinary, not everyday, not like the kind of things that I encounter all the time, and yet extraordinarily ordinary. That's the only way I can think of right now on a lovely Tuesday morning here in Upland, California, to describe it. They seem utterly ordinary. So the thing that I keep talking about, that I should never have talked about, that I kind of hate talking about anymore, that I talked about on my previous video that people wanted to talk about in Hebden Bridge when I gave that talk in Hebden Bridge, the last talk I gave in Hebden Bridge, England, which is that experience that I talked about in Hardcore Zen, and what was it? There is no God and He is always with you, where I was crossing the bridge in Tokyo and I had this big mind-blowing experience. That experience was at once a big mind-blowing experience, but also extremely ordinary. It was so ordinary that my ordinary life could never be as ordinary as that was. That was so ordinary that it made ordinary ordinariness seem weird. That was the weird part about it. It was at once really, really a huge break from whatever sort of life I'd been living up until then, but at the same time it flipped it over to the point where I realized, oh yeah, that's ordinary. This that I've been living through for my entire life, this is the weird thing. That was ordinary. I guess that's why they call it awakening, because awakening is probably a good metaphor for it, because awakening is when you realize that the dream you've been having, where, during the dream everything seemed kind of, you didn't question it. Then you wake up and go, oh wait, this is ordinary. All that stuff where I was a circus clown flying through outer space being chased by dragons, that was weird. This being in bed with the dog at my feet, that's ordinary. It was a bit like that. So it's sometimes mystical but never strange was how Nishijima Roshi encapsulated that. At least that's how I take it. So I hope I haven't totally confused you with this bit of improv that I tried to make this morning. And at least, if nothing else, I hope you enjoyed my weird rendition of Good Vibrations. Anyway, if you want to support me to keep on doing stuff like this, these videos, you can go to the URL that you are seeing on your screen below, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. Your donations are how I keep going. They are my main means of support, even though I just came back from Europe and I got paid for most of the events I did in Europe. That will not keep me going for the rest of the year until I get to go back to Europe again. So I really count on your support. But as always, this is offered for free, so you don't gotta donate if you don't want to donate, even though I do appreciate if you do donate. So, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. See you laters. Bye. Hey, Ziggy. Hey, Ziggy. 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 Hey, Ziggy, you picking up good vibrations? Are you picking up excitations? You want to go back inside and edit the video? Alright, we'll do that. Okay. Bye, Ziggy.